Dusk is 5 years old. Wow. Originally developed by David Szymanski and published by New Blood Interactive, it's hard to believe it's been half a decade, more if you count the early access stretch, since this twisted indie came roaring into our lives and shot us back to the glory days of first-person shooters. To celebrate this milestone, New Blood has released the completely free, completely optional Dusk HD, overhauling the game's visuals and throwing in a few extra goodies. It also marks the release of Dusk SDK, which is sure to bring some future epicness from creative fans. A quick note, this is only available for the PC version. There's no news yet on whether or not the console version will be getting this update. Dusk is a game I have an immense amount of gratitude for. Not only is it one of my favorite games of all time, providing a style of shooter I thought I'd never see again, it also helped kick open the doors for the retro shooter movement, inspiring many a developer to create games of a similar style, and of course, motivating the direction of this channel and many others. So for me, this update was impossible to resist. And frankly, any excuse to play Dusk is a good one. So today I will be lending my thoughts on this update, going over its improvements, and of course, making some comparisons. Is Dusk HD worthy? Oh boy, let's find out. God dang it, every time I play this I forget the stupid combination. Ah, there it is. So the first question you likely have is, what does Dusk HD update? And the answer to that is pretty much everything. I'm fairly certain the only things left untouched is the UI, menus, loading screens, and audio. This is a complete facelift. To be clear, this is a purely cosmetic update, with the exception of the new secret weapon, the Claw of Flesh, and maybe some minor tweaks. The gameplay is the same old speedy, meaty, marvelous Dusk, the same experience we fell in love with 5 years ago. Now, before we really get going on this, there is something I want to note. While Dusk HD is a serious update, like most New Blood products, it itself is a meta-textual reference. Or at least, I believe it is, poking fun at the old Half-Life HD pack, originally developed by Gearbox for Half-Life's cancelled Dreamcast port, and officially introduced in Half-Life Blue Shift. It was also featured in the PS2 port. Like Dusk HD, it updated much of the game's graphics, with higher quality models for enemies and weapons, with some of the arsenal completely changed. Now, while this HD pack was of high quality, and still holds up in some regards, it has become a love it or hate it thing within the Half-Life community, with many finding the improvements out of place or flat out unnecessary. I'm one of those people. So when New Blood first introduced Dusk HD, I couldn't help but giggle at the deep cut they were going for. In fact, some of the new models are direct references to Half-Life HD. Even funnier were some of the less enthusiastic reactions to Dusk HD mirroring the ones to Half-Life HD. Oh, the meta. And when you think of it, Dusk itself is a tribute to first-person shooter history, dripping with deep-cut references. So this update for its 5th anniversary is truly fitting in so many ways. Now, while I have been looking forward to trying out this update, I have to admit I did bring in some of my Half-Life HD attitude, with my feelings being, yeah, I'll probably play through this once and then opt for the original models after. Especially since I am a fan of Dave Szymanski's low-poly graphical style. But I have to say, after going through this update, I'm more impressed with Dusk HD than I thought I'd be. Alrighty, let's get into the meat of it. The first thing to touch on here are the levels. As far as I can tell, every inch of Dusk's levels have been touched up. Textures have been replaced with new, higher quality versions that are sharper and pack more detail. And all of the geometry sport more polygons, rounding out many jagged, pointed edges, making for a smoother, polished look all around. If we compare this spot at the beginning of E1M3, Old Time Religion, we can see the extent of the work. The stained glass window is no longer a hexagon, but is totally rounded. The tree has defined hanging leaves as opposed to the jagged textured blob from the original, along with the bush over there, now with distinct eye-catching leaves instead of being a rock-like mound. The new grass texture has less pixelation to it and appears more dry and mossy. The skybox has been replaced as well, once again looking less pixelated and featuring more clouds and tones. And if we peek the backdrop, not only are the trees sharper, but there are a lot more of them in the texture, with more branches poking up from the top. Funnily enough, where the improvements are the most noticeable are in the smallest of places: tunnels. In the original, tunnels were kind of a blocky mess of jagged polygons. In DUSK HD, they are totally smoothed out, making them more convincing. Clearly, when we compare, the work done here is extensive, but the real trick is that the levels still look and feel like the originals, or rather, the atmosphere of the original maps remain, which is key, as DUSK's atmosphere is one of its defining aspects. It's crucial to the experience, and the way that was pulled off is simple, or at least simple in concept. The new visuals stick very, very close to the original artistic intention, and more importantly, the color palette and lighting. If we go back to our church example, there is little deviation in the colors and lighting. They are tonally identical, with exception being a little bit of yellow in the skybox. And while there are clear differences in the textures, they are conceptually the same. This was a very wise decision. If DUSK HD made sweeping changes to these aspects, switched up the colors and updated the lighting too much, it would have run the risk of altering the overall feel, which would have alienated fans. As far as the levels go, it's nothing but smart choices, and like the original DUSK, they still come across convincingly retro.
Come on!
Where DUSK HD's enhancements really jump out is with the enemies. For the most part, the new versions stick very close to the original designs, with the added polygon count bringing out some detail that was hard to notice before. But some baddies have received some significant changes that does alter their overall vibe. Leatherneck, the chainsaw guy, is pretty much a farmer with a burlap sack on his head, channeling Jason Voorhees and Dr. Salvador from RE4. HD Leatherneck is faithful to the original design, but now has glowing red eyes and is hunched over more. And instead of pyramids for hands, his mitts are clearly defined. Possessed Scarecrow is a similar glow-up, largely the same to the original, albeit with a bluer jacket, twine around his legs, and larger red eyes. The mages are essentially unchanged, but have a taller, slimmer, pointier look, with cleaner looking robes, making them feel more ghost-like. The first big whoa I experienced with the enemy designs was with the Welder. In the original, the Welder wore a silver flame suit. Now he wears an apron with shoulder armor, his burnt arms and backside totally exposed. A creepier take on the enemy if you ask me. The terrifying Wendigo, an iconic enemy for DUSK, hits a little differently too. The original appeared like a dead, gutted deer come to life, featuring a stark white skull with jagged horns and pale, leathery skin stretched over its skeletal body. In HD, it now has gray fur and larger, blood-stained horns. Its hands are more clearly defined too, with exposed bones. Its animations are more animalistic as well, somewhat ape-like if you ask me. I'm not sure if it's quite as scary as the original, but it's certainly intimidating. Intoxicator, the first boss, has way more pronounced details. Here we clearly see it has two big moonshine tanks on its back that it uses as ammo for its spit attack. We can also see green liquid oozing out of its mouth as well as distinct teeth. The original model featured these tanks as well, but they were drawn into its texture and were actually hard to make out in the heat of gameplay. Now Intoxicator might look closer to his original intention. The scientists are another example of this. They do stick close to their original look, but now you can make out way more detail. They're deformed alien-like heads that seem to be wrapped in some metallic tube, with a similar metal wire coming out of their forehead, now with tiny, red, sinister eyes. Their bodies are also lankier, with arms and legs that are less robotic in animation. You can spot these aspects in their original model too, but once again were tough to make out in the heat of gameplay. They're also sporting the exact same ties as the scientists from Half-Life HD, a clear wink and a nod to that. Sure, the original scientists had similar ties, but come on, the devs knew what they were doing here. What I appreciate the most, and have touched on a bit, is that all the enemies have had substantial improvements to their animations. While the animations in the original DUSK certainly give the game some personality, they are kinda janky, stiff, and outright simplistic. And in HD, the enemies have animations that are not only smoother and more detailed, but also characterize them better. They also have more pronounced damage feedback, which I'm a big fan of. That being said, I still love the original models. Those will always be iconic for me, but I think these new ones are a great alternative for those new to this game that might not be as receptive to the original low poly look. Last, but far from least, the weapons. Like the enemies, most of the weapon updates stick close to the original looks. Some, however, are significantly changed, but in line with the original designs. And a few are completely different takes. The sickles, pistol, lever-action shotgun, super shotgun, crossbow, and mortar are all pretty faithful, but now with way more intricate detail drawn into their textures, and more polygons slapped onto their models to smooth everything out, with some having a lighter color tone, the super shotgun and mortar in particular. A good one to focus on is the lever-action shotgun, which now more closely resembles the Winchester 1887 shotgun it's based on, although some sources online say it looks closer to a Henry .410. I'll let you suss that out for yourselves. It now has hammers in the back, screws on the tops and sides, and the corners of the gunmetal are worn down, making it feel like a well-used weapon. Compared to the original that kinda looked like a gray tube with a brown rectangle on the side, it's a substantial improvement. Similar things can be said about the pistol. We now have some wear and tear in the gunmetal, and a chamber on the side where we can see the empty shells eject. Cool detail. And then there's the crossbow, one of my favorites. The general curve of the bow and the color scheme, along with the green arrow, are all in line with the original, but now it's a bit bulkier and we can see more detail in its construction, like the metal brace in the back, along with more tonal variations in the color, representing dirt and general wear and tear. A nitpick I have is I'm not in love with the divots on the arrow, or are those little triangle clamps holding it down? Kinda hard to tell, and it sorta looks like the crossbow model is just clipping into the arrow. But otherwise, it's a fine update. Here's some comparisons. The Riveter is kind of a funny one. At first blush, the new Riveter seems quite different, but when you compare, it generally follows the same design. A long tube strapped to the base by metal straps with a square slot on the side where the rivets load in. The difference really is that it's less bulky and more rounded, and the fire tube is bigger. While it looks good, with some great detail like the rust on the tube and the open slot where the rivets load, personally I prefer the older version. That one just felt more hunky and powerful to me. The chunkiness in its polygons really added to its explosive feel. With the new one, I feel like we've lost some of that oomph. Now for the weapons that are a whole new take, or feel like a whole new take, we first have to point out the assault rifle. According to the DUSK wiki, a big shout out to that by the way, the original assault rifle was meant to resemble an M60 general purpose machine gun, whereas in HD it's modeled after a Stoner 63A. Now while both these weapons have a similar shape, they do look distinctly different from each other. The HD model in particular has wooden handholds, a longer stockier barrel, and its magazine is located towards the bottom. It makes you wonder why the machine gun model was changed up when the other weapons stay pretty close to the originals, and my guess, which might be a stretch, is that this may be another reference to Half-Life HD, which also completely changed up its rapid-fire weapon, going from an SMG to an M4 carbine. Before someone dings me in the comments, I should also note this happened with the pistol too, going from a Glock to a Beretta. Speculation aside, I don't mind the switch up. I like the new look of the assault rifle, and honestly I feel like this design fits its bombastic, chunky fire a little better than the original. The hunting rifle is conceptually the same, being a bolt-action rifle. But in the original, it was really a long gray tube, and now it straight up looks like a Springfield rifle or maybe a Winchester Model 70. I'm not a gun expert, so apologies if I'm off on any of this, but overall it feels like it was ripped from an old World War II shooter, which I'm all about. Last is the sword, and holy crap, what a glow up. The original was a pretty basic looking medieval sword. The new sword, however, looks like a mystical implement taken from the crypt of an evil wizard or maybe the very depths of hell. It's adorned with magical runes, an elaborate blade, and intricate detail in its hilt. It's a look that fits its magical abilities far better if you ask me. And for funsies, here's a comparison of the cigar. New cigar simply has more detail and is just as badass. And that S symbol still brings me back to the good old days. Kill him. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on the new secret weapon, the Claw of Flesh, aka the Dark Claw. This death staff has some fun history to it, as it was a weapon designed for the early versions of DUSK, but was ultimately cut out. Until now. Found in the secretest of places, or by using a cheat code, the Dark Claw is essentially a BFG type, firing a rapid spread of magic that will tear through enemies like butter. The catch is its ammo draws from your health and morale, so going too ham with it can easily put you in a tough spot. Not my favorite weapon of the bunch, but a fun inclusion nonetheless, and certainly nice for those that want a little power trip. DUSK HD is a worthy remaster that proves itself as more than a gimmick. It updates DUSK's visuals beautifully, maintaining the feel and artistic intention of the original and giving further character to its enemy roster. It is a fantastic victory lap for this shooter's success, and the fact that it's totally free and totally optional is a cherry topper. Is it the definitive way to play DUSK? Honestly, DUSK is amazing no matter how you play it. For this video, I was hopping between both versions to capture footage and having an equally fun time. I know for myself in the future, I will be playing both these versions depending on my mood. At the end of the day, how you enjoy DUSK is the right way to play it, and the fact that New Blood has provided an alternative is awesome. For all PC DUSK fans, definitely give this a look. I mean, shoot, you already have it, why not? And for those who have yet to experience this classic, now is as good a time as ever. My only hope is that this update someday comes to the console ports, because those versions are fantastic and that player base deserves the choice too. What are your thoughts on DUSK HD? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and smack that bell. If you want to come say hi, my Discord is linked below along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.